You make no friends in the pits and you take no prisoners. 1 minute you're up $500,000 in soybeans and the next, boom, your kids don't go to college and they've repossessed your Bentley. Are you with me?
The revolution starts now.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Turn those machines back on!
You are about to enter the Peter Schiff Show.
Show me the money!
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The Peter Schiff Show is on.
I don't know when they decided that they wanted to make a virtue out of selfishness.
Your money, your stories, your freedom. The Peter Schiff Show. The Peter Schiff Show.
This episode is sponsored by Momentous. If you're interested in making a true investment in your health, go to livemomentous.com and use code GOLD to get 20% off your new routine today. Today's podcast is also sponsored by Kalshi. Kalshi is the first legal financial exchange in the U.S. where you can bet on any event. Bet on things like, when will the Fed cut rates? Or will TikTok be banned? Or will there be a forced sale? Go to kalshi.com/gold and the first 500 traders will get a $20 credit. Welcome, everybody. Before I forget, I want to let everybody know that I am going to be at the Orlando Money Show this Thursday. So if you're watching live or you watch it tomorrow and you happen to be in the Orlando area, come by. Now, some of you may have already made plans. I know I mentioned it some time ago that I was going to be at the Orlando Money Show, so maybe some of you are already headed that way and I'll be able to see you. I have three, talks. I'm on a keynote. I think I'm on a panel and I got a workshop, and I'm doing everything on the morning and early afternoon of the first day of the show. So if you want to see me in person, if you want to, say hi, you got to be there on day one in Orlando. But I have three representatives that work with me who will be there for the entire show. We've got a booth in the exhibit hall. Heyman Cathoria is going to be there. He works out of Los Angeles. Kyle Krause, who actually works in Orlando, lives there in the Florida office, and Brendan Smith, who works with me here in Puerto Rico. And so he's coming to Orlando as well. So it gives you an opportunity to meet some of the representatives in person and talk with them. So I look forward to seeing everybody. I'm only going to be there for the one day, most likely, because I'm bringing my family to Orlando. We generally make a vacation out of it, and we're doing that again this year. And so that's why I'm not going to spend all my time at the conference, but I will be there for the first day. So look forward to seeing everybody there. Anyway, so far, obviously, a short week. This is Tuesday. But what's been interesting about the markets, the last couple of days and last week, is that we keep making new highs. The Dow Jones has been making one new high after another. These are all-time record highs. We did that again today, although today the Dow actually closed down 350 points. So it made a new intraday record high, but wasn't able to hold. I didn't see anything significant really about this decline. So I don't see any reason to think that the market can't make more new highs, although the Dow was the only index that made a new high today. But one of the things that I think has been driving the markets for the past week or so, or maybe two, is the rise in the polls of Donald Trump. I think there is very much a Trump trade going on in the market. Certainly you can see that if you look at Donald Trump stock, DJT, which has been on a tear recently, although it did have a reversal today, like a lot of other stocks did. But Donald Trump stock made a low of about $12, $12.50 a few weeks ago. And this morning it was about 33. Now, the reason it went down so low is a lot of the insiders that had been involved from the beginning, from the SPAC, a lot of their shares came off lockup. And so they dumped. And in fact, in anticipation of the end of the lockup, the stock got killed. Now, a lot of those guys probably shorted the stock and covered when they were able to get their shares, freely traded. But that had a lot of downward pressure on the stock. But now the stock's been running, and I think it really just amounts to a bet on Trump winning. Same thing I think has happened with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's had a pretty big move. It got down below 60,000, didn't go much below it. And today we were trading above 67,000 on Bitcoin. Nothing, out of the ordinary. Bitcoin has been range bound for the past 7 months. So I don't think there's anything significant about the move from 60,000 to 67,000. But I do think it is part of the Trump trade, because a lot of people in crypto believe that Donald Trump is very bullish for Bitcoin, and that if Trump wins, that Bitcoin is going to moon, that the U.S. government is going to be buying Bitcoin. Now, again, it's not going to happen. In fact, Trump, with all the promises he's made, and he's made a lot of promises, and I've gone over some of those promises on the podcast, but one of the promises he did not make was to buy any Bitcoin. I know RFK Jr., when he gave his speech at the Bitcoin conference, he said that he would buy Bitcoin, but he's not going to be president. Donald Trump talked about a Bitcoin reserve, but he didn't want to fund that reserve by buying Bitcoin. He just promised not to sell any of the Bitcoin the U.S. government already owns. Well, by the time he becomes president, and, I still think he's going to win. I said that from the beginning, that I didn't think anybody could beat him. And despite the fact that the media tried to manufacture all this hype and popularity for Kamala Harris, the problem was they couldn't sustain that myth all the way to election day. It began unraveling rather quickly. I mean, what maybe they needed to do is they needed to shoehorn her in a week before, right? If they could have kept Biden on the ticket up until like a week before the election, and then maybe pulled the switcheroo, I don't know. But they got her in there, and they ginned up all this phony support. I didn't think it would last. I thought Trump would come back on top. And in fact, if you look at the betting markets, which are probably a lot more accurate than the polls, I'm looking at Kalshi, who's now, a new sponsor of this program. And when I looked at their site on their last ad, was like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And if you wanted to bet, Kamala Harris, she was like 51 cents, 51, 52 cents. And Donald Trump was like 48 cents, 49 cents. So Harris was a slight favorite. Well, if you look at the chart, you can see these gambling sites that you could really chart the movement of the odds. But starting around October 10th, that's when Trump started to move up and Kamala started to move down. And Trump is now at 56 cents, 56% chance winning. Kamala is all the way down to 44. That is the lowest I've seen her, since the convention. And Trump at 56%. So you can see that the markets are starting to believe that Trump is going to win this race. And that's bullish for the markets. I mean, what is Donald Trump promising? He's promising to lower corporate tax rates. That's good. He's promising less regulation. That's good. So lower taxes, fewer regulations. That's bullish for the market relative to what the markets would be encountering in a Kamala Harris administration. So I think that's what's going on with the market. Also, you've got this false narrative that's been spreading around ever since that BS jobs report that we talked about, that this economy is actually a lot stronger than people thought. So it's the best of both worlds in that we've got an economy that's growing, meaning that's good for corporate earnings, but the Fed's cutting rates anyway. So the market's got its cake and it's eating it too. It's got everything it wants. It's getting the rate cuts, but not because we have this weak economy that might jeopardize their earnings. We're getting rate cuts even though the economy is strong. Now, of course, the economy is not strong. The numbers were BS, but that's also been powering the U.S. dollar. The dollar index is not above 103, and it's been trending higher along with long-term interest rates. That's a another forecast that I happen to hit the nail on the head. I said, and it turned out so far that I'm right, that when the Fed cut rates, I said that would mark the bottom for long-term interest rates. And in fact, that's what's happened. Long-term interest rates have gone up almost every day since the Fed cut short-term rates, although they were down a bit today. I saw on Friday the yield on the 10-year Treasury had got up to 4.1%. Now it's about 4.3 or 4.4. Market was closed yesterday, Columbus Day, but we reopened today, and so the bond market was a little firmer. But in general, we've had a very solid trend. I think the bond market has been down and yields have been up on a weekly basis every single week since the Fed cut rates. And that's exactly what I said would happen, that rates would start to rise. And that is going to ultimately confound what the Fed is trying to accomplish with its rate cuts. But people still think that rates are rising because the economy is strong, the dollar's rising. That's what's kept gold from making another new high. I mean, it's not really going down very much. Gold right now is 2,663 as we speak. I mean, the high was like 2,670 something. So we're no more than $10 or $15 off an all-time record high for the price of gold. So gold hasn't gone down. It just, in this environment of rising rates, strengthening dollar, stock market hitting new highs, gold hasn't made a new high. And I think that's partially the reason that Bitcoin's been able to make some headway now that, you've stopped the movement in gold. People now are paying attention a little bit more to Bitcoin. Oh, gold's not moving. This is just the traders I'm talking about, people who are trading in gold mining stocks, or people who are trading in Bitcoin ETFs. These are just traders. People that are looking for momentum, looking for something that's moving, and they're just going to trade it, right? By the way, I made a comment in my last podcast, and one of my clients emailed in. I guess there was a misunderstanding because I try to explain why the gold mining stocks were so low when they should be so much higher. And I said, well, the investors don't understand it, that the people who are buying gold, physical gold, are different than the buyer groups for gold mining stocks, because the buyers of gold mining stocks are the investors, the stock market, right? And within the stock market, there's a lot of dumb money in there. Now, that doesn't mean all the people who are buying the gold stocks are the dumb money, but all the people who could be buying the gold stocks, who are buying other stocks instead, they're the dumb money, right? These are the guys who are also buying 10-year or 30-year treasuries at 4%. They should be buying gold stocks, but they're not, because they're buying something else instead. But eventually they're going to figure out what incredible value opportunities these stocks have. I mean, right now, nobody really cares. Most traders don't even care. In fact, some people don't even look at anything other than a chart. The fundamentals don't even matter. They just go where the action is. They go where the momentum is. And that's where the money goes, because everybody is so short-term focused. Especially a lot of professional asset managers, portfolio managers, investment advisors. They know that they're getting constantly graded on their short-term performance. And so they're just looking for whatever is going to do well in the short run. They're not very focused on the long run, because that's not a real concern if their clients close their accounts before they get to the long run. So what most people do is they just try to beat everybody else in the short run. And if everything collapses in the long run, well, if everybody loses money, well, then you don't look so bad, and you just blame it on the markets and you ride it out. There's not as many people who are willing to underperform in the short run if the payoff for that is outperforming in the long run. Now, that's my style. That's what I've been doing. And I think that it's been a long wait with respect to these gold mining stocks. But I think there's going to be a big payoff at the end of this. Anyway, I got a quick commercial break. We'll be right back, so don't go anywhere. We all want to perform at our best, but sometimes the nutrients we need are hard to get through diet alone. In a perfect world, we would all get enough of the nutrients we need for high-level performance from our diets alone. But this is the real world, And the truth is, everyone could use some help in continuing to find a new personal best day after day. The Momentous 3, protein, creatine, and omega-3 are the 3 nutrients that expert research shows are the foundation of long-term health. Taking them daily supports every cellular function of the brain and body, from muscle recovery and growth to focus and energy. The Momentous 3 is the easiest way to drive the biggest impact on health span. Momentous also takes it a step further. As a supplement company determined to bring trust and transparency to a space lacking both, all their formulas are designed with human performance experts and are NSF and Informed Sports certified for use by professional and collegiate athletes. That means sourcing ingredients for quality, not just what's cheapest, and what's on the label is exactly what you're getting. I just received the delivery from Momentous because I take my health and performance seriously. So if you're interested in making a true investment in your health, why not join the best in human performance and be part of the change in raising the bar on supplements? Just go to livemomentous.com, MONENTOUS.com, and use the code GOLD for 20% off your new routine today. That's livemomentous.com with promo code GOLD to get 20% off. Now, I talked about gold just before the break. I want to also mention silver because, silver to me now reminds me a lot of what gold was like earlier this year when it was building a base above 2,000. And we then exploded, and now we're getting close to 2,700. Silver is doing the same thing at $30. So I think $30 to silver is kind of like 2,000 was for gold. We're building a strong base of support around $30. Right now we're 31.57, so we're got a little bit of distance between the current price and 30. But I think we are really setting up for an explosive move. I've thought that for a while. It's going to happen. I'm confident of that. Don't press your luck. You really should be buying more silver. In fact, we're having a sale right now at Shift Gold. It's kind of like a pre-silver breakout sale on junk silver, $50, the 50-cent pieces. Some of them have Kennedy, John F. Kennedy on the coin. The older ones have Ben Franklin. I like those with, they've got the Liberty Bell, I think, on one side and Franklin on the other. Those are the Franklin $50. They replaced those with the Kennedy $50, but they didn't make nearly as many $50 as they made dimes and quarters. So there are not as many around. And so they normally sell for a pretty big premium relative to their silver weight than when you buy the dimes and the quarters. And I like the coins. I mean, I like the way they look. I like, they're substantial when you hold them in your hand. And they're almost like a little bit of a collectible. Because they're generally in better shape, dude, because they didn't circulate. I mean, people didn't spend the $50 as often as they spent, dimes. The dimes were going through, phone booths and all kinds of wear and tear on a circulated dime, quarters too, but $50 just, people didn't spend them as much and they're in better shape. These are circulated coins, but some of the coins, when you get a bag of junk silver and you get the $50, some of them look like they're uncirculated. So I think it's a good deal. We're running a special now. When you buy a full bag, which is $1,000 face, we're charging the same price to get the $50 as you would pay for the dimes and the quarters. They've never done that since I've had Shift Gold for how many years? Over a decade. We've never priced them this low. It comes to $1.95 over spot. So you should take advantage of that. Get yourself a bag. They're great for barter. I think eventually it might come down to that, where if you want to buy something, especially on the black market, the guy selling it to you is going to want real money. So he's not going to take your credit card. He may not even take your paper money. He's certainly not going to take your Bitcoin. But if you got some of these Ben Franklin $50, I'm sure that you could write your own ticket and buy stuff. Anyway, one of the interesting commodities to watch today in the market was oil, because oil prices were down about $3. At the low, oil was back below $70 a barrel. And the catalyst for this $3 sell-off overnight, Israel came out and pretty much assured everybody that they're not going to target any Iranian oil assets. And that's, been a concern of the markets. that something would happen to disrupt oil. And Israel came out and said, don't worry, we're not going to do that. And so a lot of that risk premium came out of the market. I don't think that's a coincidence. In fact, that would be a great way to go after Iran, would be going after their oil. I think the reason that Israel is not doing that is it's a favor for Biden and Harris. President Trump Biden is in office now. Harris could be in office. And I think he called in a favor from Israel. We give a lot of aid to Israel. And so, the money comes with strings. And one of those strings right now is don't do anything to make the oil price go up, because Biden wants and Harris wants to keep oil prices as low as possible when the election is coming up in just a few weeks. In fact, that's why I believe it was a couple of weeks ago that Saudi Arabia announced a production increase unexpectedly out of the blue. They said they no longer want $100 oil now. They just want to gain market share, and they're gonna produce more oil. I don't think that was a coincidence. I think he got a phone call from the Biden-Harris administration and said, hey, you got to do me a favor. I don't care what you do after the election, but just between now and the election, open up the spigots and keep that oil going. This is not unprecedented. This is exactly what they did before the midterms. That's why they opened up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and dumped all that oil on the market. That was ahead of the midterm elections in 2022. That's how they held on to House seats, the Senate seats, was because they got the oil price to come down. The last thing that Harris wants is angry voters driving to the polls with expensive gas, right? So they want to claim that oil prices are coming down, inflation is coming down. They want to take credit for it. So they're leaning on Saudi Arabia. They're leaning on Israel to at least keep the prices down between now and the election, right? After the election, it's not a big deal because it's a long time before the next one. And so they don't care. But this is all part of the show. But of course, a lot of it has to do with panic mode going on at the Harris camp, because she is sinking in the polls, as I said, and more, I guess, significant in the betting markets. Where they're really hurting the Democrats is in the African-American community, particularly men. I'm looking at these numbers, and Harris is only getting about 40% of the African-American men. That's half of what Obama got. And if Harris gets 40% of the black vote, well, that means Trump gets 60%. He wins. Now, this is black men. They didn't have the statistics for black women. I mean, there is a pretty big gender gap that crosses the racial divide. So a lot of women are voting for Harris. I don't think it's because they're women and they just want to vote for a woman. I don't think that has anything to do with that. I just think they're voting for her because emotionally they think that she's the better candidate. I don't think it's about her gender, but you have that same divide in white men, black men, women, where you have Harris winning women and Trump winning the men. But if Trump wins African-American men, I mean, that hasn't happened. I can't even remember when that happened, if it's ever happened. I mean, obviously, if you go back to the early days, where blacks got the vote because, the Republicans freed them, they were voting Republican way back when. But FDR flipped a lot of African-Americans, although they didn't call them African-Americans back then, but flipped, a lot more black vote to the Democratic Party. And then Lyndon Johnson, the Great Society, that's really when the shift came. And ever since then, the Democrats have pretty much owned the black vote. And it's very refreshing to see this rebellion going on right now within the African-American community, because they know that they've been sold out by the Democratic Party. I mean, I've called them, poverty pimps for years. I mean, they've entrapped blacks in poverty. All of these Great Society programs were deliberately fashioned to create dependency, to create dependency so you can get votes, right? You cripple somebody and then you give them the crutch, and now they depend on your crutch. Well, you can count on their vote because they now feel that I can't lose this crutch, right? I need this government crutch, right? That was the Harry Browne. I always liked his saying. He said the government is great at crippling you, then giving you a crutch and saying, you see, without me, you couldn't walk, right? Well, without the government, you wouldn't be crippled. Well, the government has crippled African-American families and made them dependent on government welfare and other programs. And now they've got their vote because they're afraid of losing these programs. And society, and the only way to protect against racism is to vote for the Democrats because they're going to go after these white racists who are keeping you down, right? The reason you're not successful is because there's this white racist who is oppressing you, and you have no chance of success because of this systemic racism. Your only chance is to vote for the Democrat because we're going to go after the racists and level the playing field. But a lot of the African Americans are realizing this is a bunch of nonsense, that this is all BS, and they're starting to lose the stranglehold on the African American vote. And that's why Donald Trump is probably going to get a higher percentage of that vote than anyone in recent memory. But the other reason is that African Americans have been disproportionately impacted by the policies of the Biden-Harris administration and by inflation. The economy is lousy. It's not good like everybody claims. And it's particularly bad for African-American men. They have been decimated over the last 3 or 4 years. And they're not buying all of this nonsense. And they're not buying the idea that Harris is the change candidate. I laugh. She's saying for change. In fact, she was just interviewed. And I was watching the interview, and the woman who interviewed her, I forget who it was, asked her if you could change something or that Biden did over the last 4 years, what would you do differently? And her answer was, well, I can't think of anything. Well, if she wouldn't do anything different than what Biden did, how does voting for her change anything? I mean, according to Kamala Harris, what she means by change is exactly the same. Right? We stay the course. We do exactly what we've been doing, and that's the change, right? The only change is gender, right? Unless that's what she means. Vote for me because I'm a woman, right? It's we need a woman in the White House. What we need is someone competent in the White House, somebody who understands economics, the proper role of government. Doesn't matter what gender they are. But the real thing I think that has angered African Americans were the comments made by former President Barack Obama. And I'm going to get to that on the other side of this quick commercial break. So stick around. We'll be right back. There's finally a way to trade directly on events that directly relate to companies, such as what inflation will be, or interest rates, or will ChatGPT 5 be released this year, or how many cars Tesla will deliver this quarter. Kalshi, which was founded by 2 MIT engineers, is the first legal financial exchange in the U.S. where you can bet on any event. It's basically like the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, but instead of day trading stocks, you're betting on things that you actually care or maybe even know more about. The exchange has hundreds of thousands of users and has already seen more than $500 million of trading. Kalshi has a ton of company-related markets where you can make money by betting on the things that impact companies most. Let's say you believe the Fed will cut rates 5 times this year. It's currently priced at a 43% probability. You can buy shares of 5 rate cuts at 43% or 43 cents. The price changes based on what the market thinks the odds of that event are. Let's say you want to buy 100 shares and you pay 43 cents a share. Times 100, that's $43. If the Fed cuts rate 5 times, you win 100. If not, you lose it all. You can always sell your shares before the results come in. Like if the price goes to 80%, you may want to sell your shares for 80, booking a $37 profit rather than holding to the end and risking losing it all. You can also pick other numbers of rate cuts. For example, you can bet that 3 or more will happen this year. For me, I look at Kalshi as a fun way to gamble while potentially hedging some of your actual stock positions. Kalshi has many company-related markets to trade on. You can sign up using my link at kalshi.com/gold. And the first 500 traders will get a free $20 credit. That's kalshi.com, KALSHI.com/gold. So, as the Harris camp is watching her polls sink among African-American men, they brought out the big gun, Barack Obama, to try to appeal to African-American men to get them to vote Kamala. And to me, it was like the New Coke campaign. It was a big backfire. And he really insulted and angered a lot of African-American men because, according to Barack Obama, they needed to vote for Kamala Harris because they were black. And therefore, they're expected to vote for the Democratic candidate. Well, why? Why are you supposed to vote for somebody just because you're black? The Democratic Party owns your vote. You have a duty because you're black to vote for a Democrat. Would anybody say that about somebody who's white? I mean, what party do whites owe their allegiance to? I mean, are we Democrats or Republicans? What are we? Libertarians? Nobody would say because you're white, you have to vote with other whites. But somehow, if you're black, well, you're expected to vote with all the other blacks. That's racist, right? I mean, the Democratic Party, they like to accuse everybody else of being racist. Look in the mirror. In fact, one of the most racist things that Obama said, he also said that he thought that black men were not supporting Kamala Harris because she's a woman, right? So in other words, he accused these black men of being sexist. They don't want to vote for Kamala because she's a woman. So they're going to vote for Trump because they're sexist. So in other words, he said that white men aren't sexist, but the black men are. Well, isn't that racist? Could you imagine if Donald Trump said something like that and said, black men are sexist? But no, I mean, the media would have a field day about what a racist comment that is. But apparently, if you're black, or even if you're half black, right? Obama's half white, but I guess his white half gets a pass because he's got a black half. He can say whatever he wants, and he's not a racist. He's not a sexist. But a lot of blacks were very offended. So I think he probably is galvanizing probably more people. In fact, I saw on some of the on X, I saw, it's not Black Lives Matter, Black Lives MAGA, which I thought was pretty funny, but that's spreading around. There's a lot of stuff on social media now trying to sway the black vote away from Biden over to Trump. And, if the Democrats lose a lot of the black vote, they may not get them back, right? I mean, they may find a home in the Republican Party, which would be a good thing. Now, Kamala Harris also, after that backfired, she's trying to figure out, what can I say? What can I do to kind of buy up the black vote? How do I get these black men to come back? So today, she announced this program for black men, right? I mean, what about the black women? Just, she's focusing on black women because she's winning the black women's vote. So now she's got to try to appeal to black men. So she's come out with a program specifically geared to blacks. I don't know if it's just men, but she's focusing on men. But one of the things that she's promising is to give out $20,000 forgivable loans to 1 million black entrepreneurs, people who own a business and want to expand a business, or people who don't own a business and want to start one up. They can get a $20,000 forgivable loan from the government, meaning it's a gift, right? If you don't have to pay back the loan, it's not a loan, right? See, the key to a loan is paying it back, right? That's what makes a loan a loan. You don't really get to keep the money. You borrow it for a while, and then you have to pay it back. If you don't have to pay it back, it's a gift, right? So she's really saying, I'm going to give $20,000 to 1 million African Americans. Right? Oh, who was going to be one of those lucky million? I mean, that is an outright bribe to African American men. Oh, I got to vote for Kamala because if she wins, I might get my $20,000 gift, because that's what it is. I mean, didn't they learn anything from the PPP forgivable loans? How many people paid back those loans, right? They weren't loans. And of course, most of the people who get these loans, they're not going to really have businesses. They're just going to write something on a piece of paper to get the $20,000. I mean, anybody could start a business that just to, because your whole business model is, I'm starting this business and I'm going to have $20,000 in sales because I'm going to make one sale to the U.S. government and it's pure profit. And then that's it. I'm out of business, right? I mean, anybody could do that. Could say they started a business. Oh, I want to expand my business. This is an outright gift. But of course, nobody in the media is talking about how it's unconstitutional. You can't have a program. I mean, I think the program is unconstitutional anyway. But apart from that, it's specifically for blacks. Well, what about a white guy or a woman? I mean, you can't say we have a program, and in order to qualify for this program, you must be black. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, that violates all these civil rights laws. You can't have a racist program. Now, you could have a program that might disparately impact African Americans. Let's say if you target certain opportunity zones for treatment and maybe they have a higher percentage of African Americans, okay, but you can't come right out and say this is for, blacks and whites can't get one. Hispanics can't, Asian Americans can't. Just black Americans qualify for this just because of the color of their skin. Now, first of all, how black do you have to be in order to get the loan? I mean, if you're half black, right? Like Obama, right? Do you get the loan, right? I mean, there are a lot of people that are half black. I mean, figure maybe they should only get 10 grand if they're half black, right? Do they proportionally reduce the amount of your loan by the percentage that you're not black? And then what about wealth? I mean, so let's say I'm a poor white guy. I can't get any money, but if I'm a rich black guy, I can, right? And if I'm not, I'm only half black. What about Dak Prescott, right? He's the highest paid guy in the NFL. He's half black, white. Does he qualify? Can he start a business and get his $20,000 check, right? Or just get it? You don't have to start a business, just expand whatever business he has. The whole thing is ridiculous. But imagine if Donald Trump came out with a plan saying, I'm going to give $20,000 to white people who want to start businesses. You have to be white. I mean, could you imagine the backlash he would get? But somehow Kamala Harris can have a program that you have to be black. Only black people can get the money. No white people can get any of the money. And nobody says this is a racist plan. Everybody just reports it. But it shows the double standard. It's one of the things I really hate is hypocrisies and double standards. And this is a double standard. And, I was reading some of her comments on, why she feels we need to do this. And one of the things she said was that, well, this is important because there's a lot of people out there who have good ideas, but, they just don't have connections. They don't have any resources. They can't get capital. And so the government should give them the capital, which is complete nonsense. First of all, the government doesn't have any capital. So the government has to take the capital out of the private sector and give it to these people who supposedly have these great ideas. But the reality is, if they really had great ideas, they could get funding. I mean, she talks about greedy capitalists. Well, greedy capitalists like great ideas. If an idea is great, it means it's going to make a lot of money. If you've got a great idea, you're going to find someone to fund it. I mean, you go on Shark Tank, right? Or you can do crowdfunding. No, you knock on doors, you go to a bank, you get a business plan, you apply for loans, or you look for equity financing. I mean, look at all these people who have started businesses. Some of them are now very successful businesses. This is a free market. Now, yes, the government has put a lot of roadblocks. The government makes it more difficult than it should be for people to raise money and start businesses. So if Kamala Harris really wanted to do something to make it easier, we would start getting rid of a lot of these government rules and regulations that make it harder for people to get investors and start a business and borrow money and all that. No, she just thinks the government should decide who's got a good idea and give them the money. But it doesn't work when the government does it because they're not investing their own money. It's all political. Most of these ideas are lousy ideas. That's the problem. Remember Solyndra? And that was just one example. But it's not the government. But again, Kamala Harris was raised by a communist, right? She had a Marxist professor for a father. So she doesn't understand anything about economics. So that's why she thinks, oh, if people have good ideas, the government should be funding all these good ideas. No, the free market needs to fund all those ideas. The government needs to stay out. But, there are things she could do, to help African-American men. One of the things that really hurts them, a lot of people, not just African-Americans, are all the occupational licensing laws. Now, most of those laws are not imposed on a federal level. They're imposed on the state level, but she could speak out against them to make it easier for people to enter occupations where they don't have to go through expensive training to get licenses that they don't need. I mean, you need a license to be a hair barber, a hairdresser. I don't think so. I mean, why should you need a license? My wife cut all of our hair during COVID, and she did a pretty good job. I mean, she never went to beauty school. She just cut our hair. It wasn't bad. During COVID. Some of you might have remembered watching the podcast. I mean, those were my wife's haircuts. But, what's the big deal? I mean, let's say somebody goes to a barber who doesn't have a license and they get a bad haircut. Well, they're just not going to go back. Big deal. End of story. We don't need the government to require you to go to school for, 6 months or whatever it is and spend a lot of money to get a license so you can cut somebody's hair. Just cut their hair, grab a pair of scissors, and there you go, right? You're a barber. If you don't do a good job, people aren't going to come back. I mean, it's just hair, right? It grows. No big deal. Get a bad haircut. Oh, that sucks. I'm not going back to that barber. That's all you need. We don't need the government license. Government, they license florists, right? If you want to arrange flowers, you need a license. Why? I mean, so you get a bad arrangement, right? What's the big deal? So I order flowers and they're not arranged in a nice way. I'm like, oh, that's the last time I used that florist. Let me use another one. I mean, there's a million of them, right? So a lot of people could start their own businesses providing these services if they didn't have to have these ridiculous licenses. Now, why are these licenses required? They're required because the people who are in the occupation, let's say I'm a florist and I want to charge a lot of money for my arrangements, but there's a lot of other florists. What can I do? Well, I can get my buddies in the government to require florists to get licenses to reduce the number of florists in the neighborhood so I have less competition so I can charge higher prices. That's what government does with these occupational licensing laws. The whole purpose is not to protect the consumer. It's to protect the business guy who's already in business. And so a lot of these laws disproportionately affect African Americans. So she should be trying to put some pressure there. She could also do things like get rid of the federal minimum wage. That might disproportionately affect African Americans. That would be a big help. But no, she wants to raise the minimum wage. But, there are a lot of things that actually could be done that might have an impact. And of course, just having a stronger economy, benefits everybody. Doesn't matter what color you are. We have more economic growth, then all boats are going to be lifted. So we need a pro-growth policy, and that means a smaller government. Because the way you grow an economy is you shrink government. Because the economy grows itself. We don't need the government to grow the economy. It grows naturally. That's the beauty of capitalism. When it's not growing, it's because government is getting in the way. So what we need is the government to get out of the way. But that's not what Harris wants. Harris wants even more government on top of the government that we already have. Now, I don't want to just, trash Harris, because Trump has been saying some things too that have been bothering me, particularly on tariffs. I was just watching this long interview he had. I think it was somebody from Bloomberg that was interviewing Trump. And he was talking about tariffs. And he tariffs. Tariffs, my favorite word. I love that word. It's the best word in the dictionary. I love tariffs, right? Like they're not taxes. And he keeps talking about how he's going to put 100%, 200% tariffs on the Chinese, on other people. Like the Chinese are going to pay these tariffs. Like the Chinese are going to write a check and send the money into the U.S. government. No, the tariffs are not on China. They're on Americans who buy Chinese products. That's who pays the tariffs. That's who always pays the tariffs. If governments could tax foreigners with tariffs, that's all they would do because they can't vote, right? If you could, just tax people in other countries and not tax your own citizens, everybody would do that, and all we'd have is tariffs. Tariffs are paid by the people who are buying the product. So it's the Americans. Now, yes, they can impact the Chinese because let's say the U.S. government, Trump, puts a big tariff on Chinese products. Yes, the Chinese will sell fewer products to Americans, but the products that they do sell will be at much higher prices. And so some Americans will stop buying Chinese products and they'll just have to buy another product that maybe is cheaper than what the Chinese products are now, but a lot more expensive than it was before. Or in many cases, they just won't buy anything at all because maybe the only item they can afford was made in China. And now that it's so expensive because of the tariff, they can't buy it at all. So they just buy nothing. So now the Chinese company loses out on that sale, but the American loses out on the merchandise. But those who can still afford to pay the higher prices will pay those prices. China will still get the sale, but the American will pay the tariff, and the U.S. government will collect that money. But it's not like the Chinese, okay, well, I didn't sell that product to an American. We're just going to, drop it in the Pacific Ocean. They're going to sell it to somebody else. So somebody in another country is going to get that product at a bit of a lower price. And so they end up winning, right? People who live in other countries. And the Chinese, maybe they sell their product for less than they would have got had they sold it in America, but they still sell it, right? They just don't sell it to an American because we can't afford it because of the tariff. And now somebody else buys it. Or the product stays in China. Somebody in China gets to buy it. They don't export it. They just sell it to somebody locally. Now, they were selling it to an American, but now the Americans can't afford it. So now the Chinese catch a break and they get to buy it. So it's not what Trump is saying. And Trump also thinks, and he's right on certain things. Yes, it's terrible that we've lost our manufacturing industry. It's terrible that so many things that we used to produce ourselves, we now import, right? That is a sign of America in decline. And he's right to point out that this is really a bad thing and we need to reverse it. But simply imposing tariffs isn't going to do it. The reason that so much of our manufacturing has left the country is because it's too expensive to make it here. Why is it so expensive? Because of government, because of taxes, because of regulations that have artificially increased the cost of manufacturing in the United States. Now, Trump, to his credit, does talk somewhat about lowering taxes and reducing regulations. That should be the focus, not the tariffs. Because if you just impose massive tariffs, it's not like all these companies are going to start manufacturing in America. They can't, because if they manufactured in America, the prices would be so high that they couldn't sell the products. That's why they left in the first place. They left to stay competitive. And if they come back under the current environment, they won't be. So we need massive deregulation in our labor markets and all sorts of regulations and taxes before we have an environment where the tariffs would work, right? Because right now they won't, because we don't have the industry anymore and we don't have the ability to replace it. We don't have the savings. We don't have the supply chains. We don't have the skilled workers. He acts like I can put these tariffs on and then magically all these factories are just going to pop into existence and we're just going to start producing all this stuff ourselves. We can't. It is not possible to happen. Now, would I prefer tariffs to income taxes? Sure. Yeah. If we could cut income taxes and raise tariffs, I'd rather have Americans pay tariffs than income taxes. But it's going to take a long time to rebuild our industry. That has to happen. But Trump, again, is promising instant, a boom. Like, I'm going to put these tariffs on, and the next day, we're just going to be producing all this stuff. The companies are all going to rush back and make all this stuff here. It is not possible to do that. We don't have the factories and the supply chains and the workforce to do it, right? It's going to take a long time. We didn't lose all these industries overnight. It took decades for our manufacturing base to be exported to the rest of the world and disintegrate. We got these numbers out today. The New York State, Empire State Manufacturing Index. The only real economic number that came out today. Nobody really talked about it. Last month was like an aberration, and I talked about it on this podcast because we got a positive 11.5. And they were expecting another positive number, 2.7. And we ended up with minus 11.9. So big miss, another horrible number. Anything minus is contraction. So you need a plus number to be an expansion. Minus is contraction. So far, of the 22 months for last year, 2023, and this year, 2024, out of those 22 months, we've only had 2 positive numbers for the Empire State Manufacturing Index, and one of them was last month. And it's already been, now we're down. I mean, that has never happened. We have never had a 22-month period in the history of this index, which only goes back to about 2001. So it's not like they were coming up with this index, 100 years ago, right? So it's a relatively new index. But during those 22 years or so, 23 years that it's been around, we've never had a streak like this. So this, is the worst manufacturing economy. We're in a recession. We've been in an ongoing recession. It's laughable to hear Harris or Biden talk about the success, the comeback of manufacturing, how everything is great. It's a manufacturing renaissance. It is a disaster. It is a manufacturing recession. Most of the jobs, or a lot of the jobs that they've created, are for the people who lost their manufacturing jobs. And now they had to replace one good manufacturing job with 2 or 3 lousy service sector jobs, right? That's the secret to job creation. Destroy a good job so you can create 2 or 3 lousy jobs, and now you take credit for the extra number of jobs that were created. But so these are the numbers. You can't solve this just by erecting a bunch of tariffs. And another thing that people forget when it comes to tariffs is a lot of stuff gets exported. So unless you're going to credit back the tariffs, because let's say I'm a U.S. company and I'm manufacturing stuff, but I don't manufacture all the parts. A lot of the stuff that I need, I import, right? And then I export the finished product. Well, if you really jack up the cost of my imports, when I go to re-export it, I'm not going to be competitive on the global market. So the only way you can get around that is maybe have an export credit, so that if I pay the tariff on the way in, if I don't sell it to an American, I get the tariff back. It's only if I sell it to an American that I'm stuck paying the tariff, which means I have to stick the tariff on my American customer, right? But that's also an admission that the Americans pay the tariffs if you have to rebate them back for the exports. But if you don't rebate them back, then you've destroyed that company's ability to compete internationally, because now you've jacked up its prices. So you're really not going to make industries competitive with these tariffs. It's just, it's not going to work. It's going to backfire. Yeah, the government will raise some revenue from the tariffs, but it's going to raise the revenue from Americans. Now, Americans need to pay higher taxes, unfortunately, unless you cut spending. I would prefer the government cut the hell out of spending, so we don't need higher taxes. But if you're going to have $3-4 trillion a year deficits, you could take Elon Musk and put him in charge of some efficiency committee, and even allow him to cut spending, which, but if you're taking all the big ticket items off the table, Social Security, Medicare, Obamacare, national defense, and in fact, you're going to increase those. And when Trump says, I'm not going to tax Social Security benefits, that's increasing Social Security benefits, right? It makes the program more expensive than it was before. So if you're going to increase entitlement spending, really doesn't matter what you do with the little teeny bit that's left over. And of course, you can't do anything about interest on the debt, which is rapidly becoming the biggest expenditure, really second only to Social Security when you've got over $1 trillion just for interest on the national debt. So we need these big cuts. If we're not going to get them, then Americans have to pay higher taxes. And one way is tariffs. But, it's not good that we have to pay tariffs. Again, I pointed this out before. The reason that we moved away from tariffs was because we created the income tax in 1913. The purpose of the income tax was to replace tariffs. And why? It was because the average American voter paid tariffs, and he was not going to pay the income tax. That was the bait and switch. The politicians told American voters, we will stop the tariffs that are being paid by ordinary working Americans, and we will replace that lost revenue by taxing the billionaires. Just 1%, 2%. They can afford it. They're rich. We'll have this tiny little tax on the billionaires, right? On the Rockefellers, on the Carnegies, on the Vanderbilts, on the Mellons, all these rich families. They're going to pay their fair share. They're going to pay 1%, 2%, 3% income tax, and then we're not going to have tariffs anymore. And the voters bought it. They bought into it. And the next thing they knew, they got slapped with income taxes. And by the Second World War, all these Americans were paying income taxes. They started taking taxes out of their pay. Average American blue-collar workers were paying much higher taxes than were ever envisioned for the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. And they were paying much higher income taxes than they ever paid in tariffs. So it was a deal with the devil, and we all got screwed. And of course, now they try the same thing. Oh, we got to make the millionaires, we want to pay a wealth tax or tax on unrealized gains. All of this is a camel's nose under the tent. They're trying to get at the middle class, but they only can get to the middle class through the rich, because they're not going to vote for new taxes on themselves. That's why the revenue bills, right? A lot of people, I guess, don't remember this from their 8th grade civics course, but all tax bills have to originate in the House of Representatives. Why is that? Well, because when the Constitution was first written, only the House members were elected by the people. The senators were appointed by the state legislatures. And so since the people directly elected the House, the members were more beholden to be held accountable for taxes that would affect the people. And of course, the House members were up for re-election every 2 years. So if you raise my taxes, I'm not going to vote for you. So the House was thought to be very reluctant to raise taxes, because they'd have to, explain it to the voters every 2 years why they just raised their taxes. So Congress said any bill to raise taxes must originate in the House that's closest to the people, which would be the House of Representatives. So people don't like paying taxes, but a lot of people like getting government benefits. That's why we have so much inflation. People are paying the inflation tax instead of the income tax or instead of tariffs. They just don't know that. And unfortunately, the people who have been disproportionately impacted by the inflation tax are the very African Americans that Kamala Harris is now promising to help. The fact that they've been so decimated by that tax, that's one of the reasons that so many of them have abandoned the Democrats and are now voting Republican. Anyway, that's the end of today's podcast. Probably not going to do another one this week. I'm not coming back from Orlando until Sunday. But you never know if something really big happens. Otherwise, I will be back in Puerto Rico the following week. Don't forget, if you like the podcast, give it a like, thumbs up, leave a comment. Again, don't forget to sign up for the free newsletter. A lot of people have been signing up. I see more people are getting our newsletter at at Shift Sovereign, shiftsovereign.com. Get our free newsletter. Also take a look at the premium letter that we have on that website as well. That's it. Bye for now, and I'll be back soon.